We're going to start with introductions, and so I'll start over here with the PSTA.
Good morning, Sandra Borchers with PSTA.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Janet Long, Pinellas County Commissioner.
Good morning, Darden Rice, City of St. Pete, City Council Member, Vice Chair for Insurance.
Dave Eggers, for Pinellas Chair and Pinellas County Commissioner.
Morning, Vic Lanton, Executive Director.
Randy DeChateau, Tampa Bay Mutual Savings Council.
Charles Quilliam, General Counsel, Portland, Maine, for Hillsborough, MPO.
Kimberly Everman, Board of County Commissioner and MPO member.
Good morning, Beth Alden. I'm the Executive Director for the Hillsborough MPO, and Commissioner Pat Kemp, since her regrets, she had a last minute thing come up.
Okay, I'm Commissioner Starkey from Pasco County.
Manny Lashmini, MPO staff, Pasco County.
Ron Oakley, Pasco County Commissioner.
David Gwen, FDOT District 7 Secretary.
And Gal DOT District 7.
Cindy Rasmussen, I'm the Director of Commuter Services for T-Bar.
And historically, we do everyone that's in the room, so we'll go over there.
Steve Orman, Pasco MPO. Tina Russo, Pasco MPO. Lori Shannon, Pasco MPO.
I see a trend going here. John Tewksbury with Strand Clearwater.
Thomas Earl, St. Pete, Tampa Area Transit.
Danny McAuliffe with Commissioner Starkey's office.
When we go over.
Lutz Martinez, City of Tampa Transportation Mobility Department.
Stephen Benson, City of Tampa. Steve Shecraft, HGR.
Melanie Monson, Pasco CAC.
Tom Williams, St. Petersburg Transportation Department.
Hillsborough, MPO.
What? Oh, we can't hear you.
John Long, Hillsborough, MPO.
Okay.
Sarah McKinley, Hillsborough MPO.
Hillsborough County, Richard Rank.
Colleen Weaver, Pasco County Commissioner, Jack Mariano.
Brian Pissarro, T-Bar.
Arlene Nicoluli, with Enterprise in partnership with T-Bar.
Rick Owens with the Tampa Bay Partnership.
Andy Taylor, Legislative Aide to Pasco County Commissioner Mike Moore.
Chris Leontis, T-Bar.
Angela Ryan, Ford Pinellas.
Joan Rice, Pinellas County Public Works.
Alberto Rivero, Pasco MPO. Lynn Bosco, Pinellas BPAC.
Jim Woodlake, Pinellas BPAC, Citizen Rep.
Chelsea Fine, Florida Turnpike Enterprise.
Ed McKinney, DOT.
Richard Moss, DOT. Justin Hall, DOT.
Kirk Bogan, DOT.
All right, and I think Commissioner Mariano just came in.
Jeff Howell, Pasco Commissioner.
Well, welcome everybody, and I hope you had a smooth drive up here, and that this is an easy place for everyone to get to. At this time, we take public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the group?
Commissioner, I have over here.
Yeah, I think you go on.
Can we fix the screen, please?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Nocera. I represent St. Pete Tampa Aerial Transit today. On February 5th, SkyTrans's new president, Jay Helbling, and its new compliance officer, Marco Booth, met with representatives of not only Beach Train Clearwater and St. Pete Tampa Aerial Transit, but also representatives were there from FDOT, Pinellas County's Ford Pinellas, and city officials. One of the things that they told us about was they're still interested in relocating their world headquarters from California to the Tampa Bay region. That's largely because of the effort that we've put forth over the last 3 or 4 years to further the development of this maglev aerial technology that they have patented and are in the process now of building a demonstration track, which is in San Antonio. And we expect to be invited to San Antonio within the next 6 weeks to see what the demonstration track will show us regarding their technology. So when they were here, we also took them on a tour showing them a couple of locations, one location in Pinellas County and one location in Hillsborough County. The Hillsborough County location is the Mosey site, which has an MP. I believe that there's going to be an RFP coming up on that property, and they're very interested because of the acreage that's there and its proximity to the university. which has a lot of engineering talent and also Cutter's location there. So we showed them that, and then the following day, the city of Clearwater issued the first ever of its kind for a city, a proclamation in support of our effort to bring this technology to Clearwater for a pilot project. So that pilot project, of course, connects Clearwater to its beach, and hopefully will demonstrate the ability to alleviate traffic congestion on the causeway. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Chip?
Good morning to all of you. Great to be here. My name is Rick Homans. I'm the President and CEO of the Tampa Bay Partnership, and I'm here today on behalf of our members to voice our support for two critically important regional transit projects. First, the 41-mile regional rapid transit, which will use the I-275 corridor to create a transit route linking the major activity centers from St. Pete to Tampa to here to Wesley Chapel. Our support depends on two critical features. First, that it have a dedicated transit lane for the entire 41 miles to create the frequency, reliability, and speed. And number two, that it has community-based stations that connect seamlessly to the county-based transit systems. Second is the acquisition of the CSX corridor for passenger service, which would initially link the University of South Florida with downtown Tampa as the first phase of a 100-plus mile rail corridor connecting Pinellas, Hillsborough, Pasco, and Hernando counties. If executed, these two projects would dramatically expand regional transit options and service for the residents of Tampa Bay, and we commend you for identifying both as regional priorities at your November meeting. Just yesterday, we sent letters of support to the Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco MPOs, encouraging them to include both projects as regional priorities in their respective long-range transportation plans. We've also shared our support with HART, PSTA, and TBARTA. I've provided you with a generic copy of that letter this morning so you can be aware of what we sent out. Tampa Bay is the nation's 18th largest metro area, but it lacks any meaningful transit options to connect residents to jobs, educational institutions, cultural activities, and recreational opportunities across county lines. These projects will create those connections and complement the enhancements to the county-based services that we envision in the years ahead. I'm sure at this point you're aware of our support for the RRT project, but I would like to make a few comments regarding the CSX corridor. CSX owns, as we know, more than 100 miles of railroad track in Tampa Bay, and this asset could ultimately create a passenger rail network connecting the four counties. We applaud the proposed approach that would view one 10-mile track segment from the University of South Florida to downtown Tampa as the first phase of a potentially multi-phase project. We hope you will consider the following as you move forward. If the Hillsborough segment is viewed as the first phase of a regional multi-county plan, we encourage HART to work in partnership with TBARTA. The law that repositioned TBARTA in 2017 said that TBARTA would plan, implement, and operate regional transit, and the same legislation defines regional transit as a project that cross-county lines or a single phase of a multi-phase transit project that would eventually cross county lines. If the CSX tracks truly offer a foundation for regional transit and the region's elected officials provide their collective support, then we need to put a phased regional plan on the table. Even in the scenario where CSX might agree to provide access to only the downtown Tampa to USF segment, we need to negotiate all phases and timeframes with CSX at one time, not piecemeal over years with diminishing leverage every time we go back to the table. As consultants have stated, and you pointed out at your November meeting, negotiations with CSX can only begin in earnest when there's a conceptualized project plan that identifies the routes, stations, equipment, ridership, frequency, and hours of an operation and alternatives for each. The plan also needs to articulate how a joint use agreement or outright purchase with CSX would work, covering operations on the line, maintenance of the tracks, and assumption of liability. We need this feasibility plan for both the initial phase in Hillsborough County and also for the rest of the system spanning Pinellas, Pasco, and Hernando counties. As you also recognized at your November meeting, regional support will play a critical role in the success of both the RRT and CSX projects, and that's the only way to receive the financial and regulatory support we will need from our state and federal partners to proceed. We've learned how powerful and strong our voice can be when we stand and speak together, and we encourage you to continue to exercise that unified voice on both of these important projects. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, anyone else wish to address us? All right, then we will move on to the regional interlocal agreement status.
Good morning again, Beth Alden, Hillsborough MPO. So this is just a quick 5-minute update on where we are with formalizing this group status. So we have talked on several occasions about this, and the interlocal agreement that creates the MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee, I think, has now been to all 3 of our boards for an update. So that interlocal agreement for regional planning, regional transportation planning, and coordination now includes a standing committee establishing the status of the TMA leadership group as a part of that overall regional planning framework. We have a couple of the other MPOs that still, I think, have to take action on the interlocal agreement, but I think that we, since the 3 of us have gone ahead and approved it, that puts us in a good position to go ahead and move forward with one of the other things that's provided for in the agreement, which is that this group should elect a chair and a vice chair to kind of, establish its leadership for the course of the calendar year. And that's why that's next on the agenda this morning. So at this point, I would like to pass the mic over to Whit to administer the election of officers, if that's all right.
Do we need the mic? If we talk loud, can you hear us? I'm not hearing you.
Oh,
being recorded?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll do my best. I'm no supervisor of elections, but I watch them on TV. Just to reiterate what Beth said, the rationale for having chair and vice chair for the whole year is to give higher visibility to this body, especially as we enter a new legislative session next year. The legislature has always wanted a point person for regional transportation issues, and we felt collectively that having a vice chair and chair that was predictable and we knew who that point person was going to be would help in communication efforts. So what I'd like to do now is open it up on the floor for any nominations of who the chair and vice chair would be.
Start that real quick. I'm on the Tampa Bay Water Board, and it seems to be a regional group that has done well for a lot of years. And one of the things that we have there, we don't need to do that here, but we have an executive committee that's made up of 3 members from each of the counties, the same counties that are sitting around this table. So the only thing I was thinking about is we could have a chair, a first vice chair, and a second vice chair, just so that we have, if there is a need for an executive committee, we have the 3 representation, and it also kind of starts to formulate perhaps, the next year or the year after. But I just think it's a good thing to have for our, it works really well. Everybody has a voice at the table. Just a thought.
Yeah, so Manny was just kind of whispering, maybe 1 from each MPO?
Yeah, that would be the idea, that
Yeah.
each NPO would have a representative.
So again, I'll open it up on the floor for any nominations. Do we want to start with the vice chair positions? First vice chair, second vice chair, or do we want to
No,
start
I
with the
think
chair?
we would start with the chair,
Start with the chair
then
position.
first vice, and then second vice.
All right. Anybody want to make a nomination?
Anybody want to raise their hand?
I nominate Commissioner Eggers.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Murray.
Any other nominations? you asked for any other nominations from the floor?
I was getting there.
Nominate Commissioner Overman.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have Commissioner Overman nominated as well. Is there a second to that nomination?
Sounds like it's a dice for the like of the second. I'm okay with that.
All right, then I'll ask for a vote on the nomination that's on the floor for Commissioner Eggers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. Wow, thank you. Okay, now we'll open it up on the floor for nominations of the first vice chair.
I'll make the nomination for Commissioner Overman for vice chair.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Long. Any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Jack Mariano.
Okay, we have a nomination on the floor for Commissioner Mariano,
Second?
and that's been seconded. Okay, so we have two candidates for that. How do we want to proceed there? Let's see.
You just vote on them in the order nominated.
Just vote on it. Thank you. You give me an assignment.
I wasn't sure about that.
It's good sign of leadership to ask for help.
Always, always. Okay, so the nomination for Commissioner Overman for first vice chair. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, maybe we ought to have a show of hands. Okay, 30. Okay, and now let's have a vote for Commissioner.
Can I vote for myself?
Yes.
You can vote for yourself, so 4. Okay, and for Commissioner Mariano. Show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Are we going to have two vice chairs?
We are going to have.
But
two
one
vice
from,
chairs.
what's two, one of you could be first and the other one could be second. So I don't know how to split this. Who's the parliamentarian?
Who breaks the tie?
Not me.
That's your job too.
A coin toss.
Do either of the.
Well, we're in different areas. Can we have 3 vice chairs?
No.
No,
No.
2 vice chairs.
Does anybody want to amend their nomination?
I will amend my vote.
Okay. Do we want to have a second vote then? Vote on the first vice chair. All in favor, say aye. For Commissioner Nanda. For Commissioner Overman, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. And for Commissioner Mariano. Okay, so we have Commissioner Mariano as the second vice chair. First vice chair, I'm sorry. And now we'll vote on the second vice chair.
Move Commissioner Overman a second.
Okay, Commissioner Eggers moves that. Is there a second for that? Okay, second. All right, let's, all in favor, I think you can say aye for second vice chair.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have it. That was the relatively Congratulations.
I think it goes to Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah,
You're gonna-
I guess if
You know
that's
how to
okay
make-
with you.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
actually, well, you are now.
You're off and running.
Well, first of all, thank you for that. I think we've got a lot of work to do, and we're doing some good things, and I look forward to that continued work in the next year. Next on the agenda, since I didn't always run your meeting either, we'll be doing Tampa Bay next. Somebody going to Thank you. They have a mic up there.
Good morning. My name is Kurt Bogan, and I'm an environmental management engineer for FDOT District 7. Thank you for the opportunity to come and present to you on where we are on this important project, which is the Tampa Interstate Study Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement. That's a mouthful. That's I-275 from the Howard Franklin Bridge to north of Dr. MLK Boulevard, and I-4 from the downtown interchange to 50th Street. We're at a very critical point in our study development. We began the supplemental EIS in January of 2017, and now we just had a public hearing after we've had a couple rounds of workshops and a lot of meetings with the community. We had our public hearings on last week, and we'll give you some results from that. And then we'll go on to develop our final SEIS and hopefully have a record of decision by the end of the year. The department has recommended a locally preferred alternative to federal highway, which is in our draft SEIS, which was presented at the public hearing. This includes the complete reconstruction of the State Road 60 interchange, the West Shore area, the downtown area, which is addition of 2 express lanes in each direction from the Howard Franklin Bridge into downtown with a direct connect ramp into downtown and safety and operational improvements in the downtown interchange. We, as a result of our meetings with the communities, we have revised our from the original EIS, and you will see those operational improvements. Segment 3C was originally already constructed. That is the crosstown connector and those improvements along the crosstown. Of course, there's no further action alternative remains viable throughout the study. Just a little bit more on the West Shore interchange. There at I-275 and State Road 60 and the I-275 corridor from there to downtown. As I said, we were reconstructing the interchange and bringing it to modern standards. We added 2 express lanes in each direction, toll express lanes to connect with the Howard Franklin Bridge project that is about to begin construction, and also connects to the veterans. This improves the general purpose lanes and its ramps, the outside ramps, bring them to up to date. It also preserves the transit envelope in the median, so that we'll have that opportunity for future transit options of fixed guideway. And as I said, it's the connection between Howard Franklin Bridge, Tampa International Airport, Courtney Campbell Causeway, Independence Parkway, and the Veterans Expressway, very destinations within that area. We're also enhancing access in the West Shore area. We're making improvements to the Kennedy Boulevard. We're connecting Kennedy Boulevard with Rio Street to provide another north-south connection in that area with a diverging diamond, a partial diverging diamond intersection in that area. Also providing connections to the Howard Franklin Bridge multi-use path. And so we will make that connection that will go either north or south to connect up to the park to the north in that area, and also down to Kennedy Boulevard. We're also reconnecting neighborhoods there at Occident and Trask. Occident is right at the rear of the West Shore Mall, and so they will be able to access the rear of the mall in that area. And also Trask, of course, you know, we purchased the DoubleTree and Charlie Steakhouse for a future multimodal center, and so that will connect the multimodal center there at Trask, and also opportunity to connect to the south of the interstate. As far as Hines Avenue, that's where the toll express lanes will connect to and from the west or to the south towards Pinellas County and towards the veterans. They will have a direct connect there. There's also a direct connect with express lanes at the Rio Street going southbound from Rio Kennedy Boulevard to the south. You'll be able to get into the express lanes to go to Pinellas County. As I said, this will, the express lanes will end with a direct connect ramp into the downtown area, into the Ashley Tampa Street, Scott Street exit to and from that area. And so it will not continue through the downtown interchange, but it will provide that direct access. As I said, with the downtown interchange, we're not doing any capacity improvements, but we felt that we needed to do some operational and safety improvements There's 1,000 crashes that happen in that interchange, and so we are improving all three movements in that interchange. The first one is the southbound I-275 to eastbound I-4, where we are widening the flyover there from 1 lane to 2 lanes. As you know, there's a bottleneck in that area going southbound. Also, we felt that there was a lot of weaving that occurred here to get off of 21st, 22nd. So we're removing the weaving from the interchange, and there will be a slip ramp that goes down to 14th, 15th. And also, not only it will merge with the northbound I-275, they will not have to get onto I-4 to get off at 21st, 22nd, but they can go along the slip ramp to 14th, 15th, and there will be a frontage road that takes them down to 21st, 22nd, so they'll still be able to access Ybor and East Tampa in that area. Also, realize that the Florida Nebraska ramps will remain open on all three of these options, so that access will remain open, and this provides an additional access into the Ybor and East Tampa area. The right-of-way impacts reduce only one parcel for this particular movement. It's a vacant property there, and so there's no relocations for this particular movement. The return movement from westbound I-4 to northbound I-275, again, we will widen the ramp from 1 lane to 2 lanes, making for better flow in that area, and that will continue all the way up to MLK, which will have a 2-lane exit ramp, and continue past MLK up to Hillsborough, which is a part of Section 7 improvements that was previously approved in a previous study. As I said, Florida Nebraska will remain open. The right-of-ways, less than 10 parcels are anticipated to be impacted. I think there's 6 residential relocations in that to be able to make that improvement. And the final movement is from westbound I-4 to southbound I-275. Currently, you have to make a decision, quick decision as to whether you want to go on to I-275 northbound or I-275 southbound, or go to downtown Tampa. So we're trying to separate those points, decision points, and so we are improving the ramp, the current 2-lane ramp to a 3-lane ramp coming around to I-275. Then there will be a slip ramp down to downtown, and you will access downtown in the way that you do today through the Orange, Jefferson, or continuing on to Ashley Street. And so those exits will remain the same. This is all done within the existing right-of-way. We will have to flip the movements of that ramp going to downtown, but it will stay within the existing footprint. And then, and during this study process, we have created many studies of the social, cultural effects, natural and physical effects, the engineering consideration, and tons of public outreach has happened since the beginning of this study, since we've reset the discussion with our interchange improvements, with our Tampa Bay Next discussions, and if you would like to further delve into any of those areas, resource areas, the reports are on the website at TampaInterstateStudy.com. As far as funding is concerned, as you all know, Governor DeSantis announced $1.4 billion for the West Shore area interchange improvements, for improvements to be made from West Shore to downtown. That is currently funded for right-of-way in the next fiscal year coming up, and construction is scheduled to start in fiscal year 23. As far as the downtown interchange, it's not currently funded within our 5-year work program, but we're working to get it funded in the upcoming cycles, and an improvement that is really needed for that downtown interchange. You will notice in section 3B, the portion out east of 22nd Street, there are no improvements being proposed for this study, but if you can recall, for the I-4 TMA study, we did have a direct connect ramp into the crosstown connector. So if you see work in that area, it's because of the I-4 study and not this particular study. As I said, we had two public hearings, two sessions of the public hearing last week one at the Hillsborough Community College, their Mabry campus. We had 78 persons that were part of that public hearing. We received 6 comments, written comments at the public hearing. We had 4 persons that provided statements to the court reporter, 2 orally during the public comment period, and 2 on one-to-one with the court reporter. Our downtown location was at the Fort Tampa Bay Cruise Terminal number 6. We had 65 persons from the public that attended that particular session. We had received 5 written comments there at the public hearing, and we had 18 persons that spoke at the hearing. What we heard at the hearing was mixed. There were some that were not for the improvements, especially in the downtown interchange area, and then there were some that proponents that spoke that for the project, and so we had a mixture of comments on that. That's it. And that's it. Have any questions?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Kirk and District 7 in general for all of their work and flexibility in coming up with a project that is widely supported by our residents. I probably mentioned this before, but we did do a big outreach survey for our 2045 transportation plan last summer. We had more than 5,000 responses, and this concept for the downtown interchange was very broadly supported, both by people around the county and also by people in the neighborhoods near the downtown interchange. And so it is now officially part of our long-range transportation plan, and we look forward to working with the department to try to advance this project concept and get it funded. I was wondering, Kirk, if you would talk, since one of our topics today is walk-by facilities and regional trails. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, maybe show us again the slide about the West Shore access area, how the changes in access in the West Shore area, because the Sun Trail corridor, the Gulf Coast Trail corridor that connects the Pinellas Trail all the way down the west side of Florida runs through this area. And so we've all been strategizing about how to make that connection happen, how to get from the end of the trail that's on the Courtney Campbell Causeway, which serves all of those great trails in Pinellas that we're very jealous of, and how to make that trail connection across to downtown Tampa, to the Riverwalk, to all the cool things going on in downtown. And then, in Hillsborough, we're also working on bringing that farther east along the Selman and then down along the shoreline of Hillsborough. So maybe the next slide, Kirk, if you could, and one more, this one. So the Courtney Campbell Causeway Trail comes in a little bit north of this area and then swings down along the west side of the Veterans Expressway to Cypress Point Park, which shows up as that green park, that Kirk is highlighting right there. And so our conversations have been about how do we make that connection across from that area. This is very challenging because of course there's a lot of traffic through here. But how do we make a connection across there to downtown? And Kirk, since we have several members of our bicycle pedestrian committees in the audience, I was wondering if you could, walk us through what the latest thinking is on that.
Well, we, as we are going through, we are looking at working with the city on the connections with the bike ped connection here, but of course, Rio Street would be one opportunity to come across and to come to the south side of the interstate. And we're looking at going along the interstate, connecting where we can, and using local streets, maybe sometimes using local streets for shared roads on local streets, minor local streets to get that connection all the way to downtown. So we're working closely with the city of Tampa in doing that. There will be, I think, a proposed pedestrian overpass over Dale Mabry Highway that will make that connection. And we have existing trails on the north side of the interstate. So we're trying to mimic that on the south side as much as we can within the interstate right of way. But when we can't, we will work with our partners at the city to make sure that it reaches to the downtown area.
Yeah, Cassandra?
Again, thank you to the DOT for all your hard work on this, and it's been like, what, 20, 30, 75 years? I've been working on this. I'm very interested in the West Shore Intermodal Center, and in combination with the West Shore interchange reconstruction. I know that we're working with you on increased capacity for public transportation during the reconstruction of the interchange. Kirk, how does this design set us up for a good connection into the intermodal center when it is built?
This design leaves a space in the median for a platform connection that will connect over to the intermodal center there in the West Shore area. So it's already staged, whether it be a rubber tire in the interim or rails in the future.
So the pedestrian connection from that center platform would be constructed with the intermodal center and not with this project?
That's correct.
So when we have improved capacity on public transportation during the intermodal interchange construction, buses that are creating that extra capacity would have to somehow get off on the regular off-ramps because there would not be the intermodal center at that time. I would like everybody to understand the staging of this and how public transportation will be integrated into the construction of the interstate.
Right. I can answer that question. As you know, we are coordinating closely with Florida on the regional rapid transit study. So timing is everything, obviously. I know T-Bar is moving forward, with the recommended concept.
Are we recording fine that way, or do you need the?
Pretty good here.
Good.
Great.
Okay, I'm loud enough.
Excuse me.
Okay, so the timing is, like I said, timing is everything, depending on when our construction will be completed, because the regional rapid transit project is really predicated on completion of our interstate project, because without it, that project would not be operational. So we have to coordinate the construction of the intermodal center as well as the median platform. So if there's opportunity to build that skywalk going from the median platform into the intermodal center, we obviously will explore the opportunity to find some cost saving in that. But again, depending on when that transit project will move forward, whether we get federal dollar and state dollar for that project, when funding will be available for the project as well. So lots of coordination need to happen for that to happen.
Commissioner Overwood?
Thank you. And along the same lines, I'm trying to figure when, if the world were perfect and funding were available, would we be addressing the transit envelope that would then allow for the intermodal center to actually be a way of connecting into the regional area for the employment centers in that area. So your timeline right now, if everything were perfect and money showed up, what are you looking at? I mean, what years, range are you looking at for the construction of that kind of work? Where you creating that envelope, redoing the 275 section between downtown and West Shore, ultimately that's driven by the section north of 275. But if we were just to work on that and have T-BARTA's BRT or RT work, are we looking at 2045? Are we looking at much further down the road? What are we talking about? Because I think it's important for us to manage expectations. And especially when we're developing a priority list. Because I love taking advantage of low-hanging fruit, but I don't like the idea of having the gigantic tree out here that looks great prohibit the low-hanging fruit from ever being harvested. This is an example.
Yes, and I can answer the question. We are setting aside that corridor, that median, as part of the construction. As a matter of fact, we are covering lots of construction costs. Like running the bus on shoulder, also running the bus in the median. We are in the middle, working with the study team, T-BARTA. So hopefully, by the time we finish construction of the West Shore interchange, you will have a facility to run the bus. The median station may not be built at the time, all depending on the funding for the transit project. But as far as our part, it will be done. So our finished product for the interstate project will be the existing condition for the transit project. What the transit project want to do, you want to build it as high as you want, or you can, just bring it into the median or exit at the ramp. It's all depending on the recommended alternative for the transit project.
Okay, so which decade are we talking about?
2028.
Okay, that's the answer to the question.
That's our anticipated completion date for the West Shore interchange.
Okay, great.
That's when it's ready.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, that perspective is always good to have, because it's just amazing when you start thinking about all this work is actually going to get in place, and then the next phase is after that. So, yeah, Secretary.
Just real quick, I wanted first, and we appreciate y'all telling us we did a good job, but the truth is that when I first got into the position and I asked the folks in Tallahassee, how do we get this funded? They said, you got to get everybody in the region to get behind it. And as we went to each of the counties and the cities and the business community, and a lot of folks came together, that's really what pushed it over. I mean, we could have done the same thing we did, and if we hadn't gotten the support, we would be sitting here looking at a project and wondering when it might happen. Ming told me at the public hearing that we went to last week that when he was a PE trainee in 1992, he went to a public hearing on the same job, and there he was nearly 30 years later, and finally getting it wrapped up. But so I want to say thank you to all the stakeholders, both in the public sector and in the private sector, that came behind us. I think that's a good lesson for us too. When we look at the Regional Rapid Transit Project, for instance, and the CSX corridor, both are prime opportunities for transit. For us to be able to get that type of support from Pasco, Hillsborough, Pinellas, from the city of Tampa, the city of St. Pete, the city of Clearwater, all of the stakeholders, that's what I think it's going to take to get those projects moved into earlier years. So we've shown we can do it, and now the next targets could be Regional Rapid Transit, CSX, and I think with the same efforts, we'd have an excellent opportunity to get ourselves up the ladder more for those projects. So thank you all.
I take, Secretary, thank you. That's a great comment, and I think that there's a lot of work that's been done with this group over the years, and I'm not saying this is the only group that helped get there, and I really want to thank our predecessors and some of you who were sitting around the table to get us to the point last year where we all got on board with that project. I mean, it's not a Pinellas County or a Pasco County, it's a Hillsborough County center, but it's for all of us. It was a really important regional thing we really proud of the group for doing that. Commissioner Mariano?
I just want to dovetail with that same thing. Secretary Gwynn, since you've come on board, it has helped tremendously getting us together as well. So your leadership has been phenomenal. But again, us coming together, speaking one strong voice, we want this done. With the community we have, the power that we actually have, we're in great shape to do many more great things too. So let's learn from this and let's build on it.
Well said. Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Cassandra.
You all are very kind and good, and there's the piece of what you're talking about that is missing that I think we ought to make very, very clear, and that is the transit piece will require a local funding, correct? There is a portion of this that the DOT will pay for and a portion that is on the locals, and it is fantastic that we have all come together on a policy level, but we are all going to have to come together on a funding level in order to make this a reality. And so while you may not feel like you can say it, I will.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cassandra. Commissioner Owen.
Thank you. And I also sit on the HART board, and so I'm very, very aware of that matching requirement, and without it, whether it comes from HART or comes from the counties, it has to come in order to match it up not only with the state's commitment, but with the Federal Transit Authority and looking at how those projects are built. You know, we are, just for lack of wondering what we're going to do, you know, we were very fortunate to have voters actually vote to help us with capital funding and a readily reliable income stream to be able to make that match if that were to come. But we are still waiting for a Supreme Court ruling. Last week, we were set for hearing on April 1st to put a Hail Mary Plan B referendum in November in the event that we get an adverse decision. But to your point, without that revenue stream, it would be incredibly difficult for Hillsborough to step forward and to make that transit plan match that's necessary for the agency itself, for the HART agency itself. It would have to come from other sources or from the county as a whole. So we really do need to think about how our bodies will look at that match requirement and understand what that looks like, so that we can actually plan it in our long-term, you know, transportation plans, but also our own individual budgets, because it is a particularly large amount, and we need to make sure that we know what that looks like and whether or not we're willing to work together on a transit, you know, on a regional level to make that commitment.
Thank you. Commissioner Long?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me. And as I look around this room, I'm probably the person who has been trying to work on these issues for the longest, just because, you know, I've been around a long, long time. And I love this kumbaya conversation that we're having. So I would like to take the step of asking. We have several counties represented here this morning, and I dare say that our citizens are probably not as aware as we all are of what we mean when we're talking about dollars for fixing the congestion and the issues that we have when we're on the highway. So, how about if those of us that serve on county commissions, I see 3 different counties represented here, come together to write an op-ed piece for the Times, educating our citizens about the challenges that we have trying to pay for these things, and because of that, how much time it's going to be before we can actually see the results. Because otherwise, our citizens are kind of in the dark when we are talking about making a huge, huge investment in this issue.
No, Commissioner Long, I would agree with that.
Thank you so much. Now we just need, hooray, look at that. So, I think, now the question is, what vehicle do we use to create that beautifully written, very positive op-ed piece without violating?
Sunshine?
Yeah.
That's such a wonderful.
I'm just bringing it
That's
to
a good
everyone's
question.
attention, so, you know, while I'm very passionate about fixing these issues, I'm not interested in going to jail. For lack of a better word.
Well, that's good to know. I'm glad we want you around. I would almost say that our NPO directors could probably formulate a letter that expresses some of the things that we're talking about. I don't know that, I don't know when the next meeting, I think it's July. It seems like forever, but then again, 8 years for that project and another project, so it's not that long, I guess, to wait. But and we can craft that letter pretty quickly and get our FPO support. So I think we need to do that too, or just going to be more of a TMA, the TMA effort. Yes.
While I think that's a great idea, I am sensitive to the fact that it's the elected officials that have those circles of influence and the voices. And so I guess we don't have an attorney sitting here, do we? You are?
There's always
Are you
an
familiar
attorney in the
with
room.
the sunshine?
Yes, I am, yes.
And so how do we craft that?
I think there's a
letter?
way you can craft a shirt, absolutely. It's not gonna be, it's.
So we all can sign on it
Right.
without having someone, you know.
So perhaps the staff directors could draft something and then we can circulate it to the members for comment, return your comments back to us.
Right.
And
Just can't
we'll
go
make the
between
edits
us,
that
you
are needed.
can just go.
We can work it out.
Thank you so much.
I always like when somebody grounds Commissioner Long. No, I love the
I knew
idea.
there was a way we could work it out. That's why I was looking for an attorney in the
Yeah.
room.
There's always an attorney. Thank you, Charles. Any other questions on getting back? Oh,
I just want to chime in on what, in terms of timing, we are going to get back together in July. The Supreme Court that's issuing a ruling, hopefully will, before they recess in June. Life is going to get really dicey. But I think it's critically important that if we get this letter out, not only would we clear up what our options are, op-ed out, what our options are, but also how important it is that we're working hard on transit and investments in our area. The voters now are like, what are you doing? And because they're not in it like we are. They have to think, is this another tax? What do we do? You know, the questions that I'm seeing on social media always are interesting, but I think where we understand what we're trying to accomplish on a regional basis, and then how critically important to have a solution in Hillsborough on a local basis, will be important to all of us, because we won't have the resources to participate in this, and I think it's critical that we will. So I appreciate the opportunity to participate in the op-ed, and look forward to working with all of you to try and get it done, with the idea that maybe we have that done before we meet together in July, but maybe after we find out if we've got a ruling or not, so we can speak more intelligently about what the options are for our voters in November.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that piece is being kind of visionary for the region with a little bit of maybe a comment on each of our counties and what those major initiatives and how that ties in. So it kind of gives everybody a sense of where we're going in total. I share your thought because I'm going out and I'm trying to talk to people about the possibility that we're going to have a referendum in Ellis County. And I get the same look. It's like, what are you talking about? How is that different from the penny that you just did? And what's the subtle differences? And, it just goes on and on. So, it's still trying to get folks to listen to you when you're speaking because everybody's so busy. But that message is not getting across. And so it'll be an interesting 6 months ahead to try to educate and inform and let people know about what we're doing. Because clearly, I think congestion continues to be our #1 issue. It's not always translated to what that actually means. So I think that's a great point. Any other comments around the table or any other questions for this presentation? No, thank you, appreciate it. And we're gonna move on to Tampa Streetcar Extension update.
Good morning, leadership group members. My name is Milton Martinez. I am the Chief Transportation Engineer for the City of Tampa Mobility Department, and I'm also serving as a project manager for the Envision Tampa Streetcar Project. So before I turn it over to Steve Shoecraft, who's the project manager for HDR, who will go into the details on the current status of the project, I wanted to provide a little bit of a background and context to where we are with the project that we're moving forward with. So our existing system, the existing Tampa TICO historic streetcar system, began as a grassroots effort from the community to develop a replica system that kind of harkened back and was based on the City of Tampa's historic streetcar system. The replica system was implemented through a partnership between HART and the city. In the late 1990s, we entered into various governance documents to be able to implement the project. And the first phase of the project was put into service in 2001 that connected the convention center all the way over to Ybor City. In 2004, HART began the phase 2 process to look at extending the streetcar system, the replica system, all the way to the Marion Transit Center. And in around 2010, HART completed through a design build process, they completed the 4-mile extension that took it from the convention center up to the southern boundary of not quite into the central business district at that time. Since then, since 2010, the region has started to recognize that the system has a lot more potential to serve as a regional system, and so that it could become a kind of re-envisioning the system to serve as a more robust transportation option for the community, and also to serve as a regional link to the greater initiatives that are starting to be discussed for the transit options in the community. So with that in mind, there were several studies that were completed in 2012. The city completed a center city plan that kind of documented the need for, as part of that re-envisioning of the downtown and the center city, the need to have that transit option be an integral part of that. And also the Downtown Tampa Partnership, as well in partnership with the Hillsborough MPO, completed an assets and opportunities study that also supported that and looked at extending the streetcar system all the way up to the West Shore area and potentially to the airport. And HART also completed a streetcar extension study that looked at the cost, so the preliminary desktop level cost for doing those improvements. So with all those studies and initiatives informing us, the city approached DOT in 2015, started having discussions with DOT about funding or co-funding to be able to initiate a feasibility study to look at modernizing and extending the system. So in 2016, we entered into a joint project agreement with DOT. DOT contributed a $1 million grant for the city to initiate that process. So we began the procurement process at that time to be able to do the study and brought on HDR to do that study for us. So the study was contemplated in 2 phases: the feasibility phase, which we would then submit to the FTA to be able to see if we can then move into the project development phase through their small SARS process. And we received that approval through FTA in 2018. And since then, we've been completing the PD&E and cultural assessments of the project. And around that same time, FDOT also provided a grant to HART to continue to operate the streetcar system as a free fare system, so long as we increase increase the frequency of service and extend the hours of operation. So that's been a very successful. We're sort of in the probably midway point of that process now, and we've seen ridership jumping on the system, and that was also to help us position the project to move forward into, once we enter into a potential grant agreement with FTA, to move forward into final design and construction of the system. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve Shoecraft, who is the HDR project manager on the project, to provide more detail on where we are with the project and project status.
So this presentation is intended as an overview of where we stand with the project now. So we'll talk about some of the key decisions that have been made, where we stand broadly in the process of our coordination locally, regionally, and with FTA, and then talk about next steps. So as Milton mentioned, this project has been discussed for a number of years. This project has taken and advanced sort of discussions significantly further than previously, but it really focuses on the same series of questions about how we provide a higher core mobility service in downtown Tampa that stitches together the broader footprint of downtown. So when you think about, when I say downtown for the sake of this presentation, I'm talking about Ybor City, Channel Side, Channel District, Water Street, the Central Business District, North Franklin Street, and Tampa Heights, into the south end of Tampa Heights. So this is a broad definition of downtown. And there's been a lot of discussions about transit-oriented development in the region. If you look at the transit-oriented development walk sheds that area represents, that's 14 or 15 walk sheds. So you can think about this as serving about 14 TODs total, given that quarter-mile walk distance that exists based on the area that this would serve. As Milton said, this has been a joint project between the City of Tampa, FDOD, and HART. DOT gave a significant grant to support the work that the city's managing now. HART's been our partner through this process, the feasibility and project development process. And if you think about the significant changes downtown, there's really, downtown is becoming a very different place than it's been, and it's only taken a baby step toward that future. So there's significant committed investment across the broad footprint of downtown, in Ybor City, Water Street, the core of downtown, up into Tampa Heights. We're talking about a total, conservatively, of $6 billion in private investment, sparked by a fairly modest amount of public investment to support that. But that investment's occurring in an environment with limited roadway capacity to move single occupancy vehicles. So we've got to move these people around, a significant greater number of people over the next 10, 15, 20 years, on the same street network, in the same rights of way, way more efficiently than we can now, or way more efficiently than an Uber, a Lyft, or a single car can. You know where I need to point this? At the computer. Let me do it. Oh, it says it needs to be logged on. Sorry. There we go. As Milton mentioned, the FDOT provided a grant to HART to provide increased service on the existing system. So it's free fares, but it's also increased hours of service and increased frequency of service. So when you think about this, it's not just that it's free, but it's also providing a full day of service at significantly higher headways than it had previously. There's also been significant changes along the corridor during this time. So there's a lot less daily free or cheap surface parking available to support folks that are accessing downtown. So we're seeing more use of the Ybor garages to support downtown destinations. We're seeing a lot of change in how people access and get around downtown. One of the things that's interesting about tracking these numbers over time is that what we've seen is this increase of 2 to 3 times the monthly ridership. But we haven't seen that decline as if this were kind of a novelty factor with the new service. People have adopted this as a new way to get around, and the numbers are still strong. And the numbers that we've seen since September, October, November, December, January, February, are all strong numbers, all about 3 times what they were before the service improvement and the free fare provision, the free fare operations. As Milton mentioned, again, we're in the midst of the project development phase of the work. We've defined the preferred alternative for the extension and the modernization improvements of the existing line. We're moving through the impact assessment process, so we have documents that have been sent to FTA to begin the consultation process regarding traffic impacts, cultural and historic impacts, environmental impacts, the full round of typical documents that are prepared for PD&E. We've got those at FTA for review. Milton mentioned that governance agreements are under discussion with HART now to clarify responsibilities as we move through design and operations of an expanded system. 30% design will be initiated in the next few months, so we'll drill down further to understand specific impacts. We'll have a better handle on costs associated with factors like utility impacts for the guideway construction. And then we'll be refreshing the research that we've done already for the small starts rating submittal, which will occur at the end of next summer. So that rating submittal for us, for a small starts project, looks at ridership, cost effectiveness, land use, and economic development. It's that full package of material that goes to FTA that they evaluate, and then sometime next year, probably February 2021, they would publish the results of their ratings, so we see how we stack up with other projects around the country. And then we would continue through design process, work toward a small starts grant agreement with FTA, and then we could initiate construction. All the material, there'll be a website at the end of this, website address. All the material that we've prepared is up there if you want to dig through any of the documents that we've got so far. You can see where we've been in the process. We've held several large-scale public workshops, good turnout broadly, 100, 150 people, an event, highly interactive, working through early on the basic questions about the purpose and need for the project, moving into discussions about whether this should be east-west, north-south, it should loop, it should cross the river, defining what was the highest performing of those different corridor options, and then digging into how the system can operate on specific roadways for the extension. We've had dozens upon dozens of small group meetings, presentations, briefings. We've been out to neighborhood groups, the Ybor City Development Corporation, Tampa, I think they're tired of us coming to the Tampa Downtown Partnership. We've been at the Bay Partnership, and see, it's funny, but I think they may be tired. We've also done a lot of coordination with the existing study. So although this is kind of behind the scenes, we have had numerous meetings with the Regional Rapid Transit Project, with the Arterial BRT Project. We've had meetings with Brightline Virgin Trains about their potential terminal location. We've met with DOT and the consultant team that's looking at the intermodal center downtown. So as those decisions are starting to be made, we understand that process and how this project integrates. However, we have proceeded with this project as if those provide additional benefits to us, but we're developing this as if it's got potential for strong success as a standalone investment. What it will do is provide, if we're ahead of the Regional Rapid Transit Study, it'll provide the location where we can interface with that service if they drop out of the interstate envelope. We'll understand how we can connect with Virgin Brightlines once they decide where they're going to land. But that process will continue as we advance through design. The project itself, the goal since early in the study has been, oh yes, sorry.
Commissioner Long.
Yes,
Sure.
I'm just curious if you have any idea when your design will be completed.
30% design, based on where we are with the project now, should last about a year. And then we'll have about a year and a half to 2 years for 100% design. And that's when we would be pinning down our agreement with FTA about their portion of the funding. So and I have a slide at the end that sort of walks through those upcoming phases. Let me flip back for a second quickly. The goal of the project is to take advantage of the investment that's been made in the existing streetcar system and extend that through downtown. So we can run modern streetcar vehicles on the existing tracks with the existing power system with some relatively modest modifications. So we have 2.7 miles of existing service. We're extending it 1.3 miles and running modern streetcar technology across the whole extent of that service. And I'll explain how that works in a minute. We're looking at a system that allows for or provides for right-hand side stops for the streetcar vehicles, so the guideway can be shared with buses or potentially in the future autonomous transit vehicles. And we're looking at ways to do that and minimize impact on local roadway capacity. The modernization improvement, I'll talk about these in pieces, but they're we'll talk about it in two parts. There's modernization improvements to introduce modern streetcar operations on the existing line. And then there's the extension and the impacts on the local roadway network as we extend through downtown into the north. The extension is going to run mostly in exclusive guideways, which means it'll be just the streetcar or other rubber tire transit vehicles in the same guideway, separate from regular traffic. We have to share a traffic lane for a portion of this where the right-of-way narrows substantially, and that's on Florida Avenue on the north end of downtown. And then when we come south on Tampa Avenue, we're back in exclusive guideway. We've assessed different running alternatives in different segments of the corridor based on the right-of-way and different conflicts and locations. So generally, we're on the left-hand side of the street, going north on Florida, the left-hand side coming south on Tampa. We have to switch over on a portion of Florida where the right-of-way tightens up, because we'll have sidewalk stops in that location. And I can circle back and go through those in more detail, but that's sort of the broad perspective. It's primarily exclusive guideway service in the extension. The modern streetcar vehicles have about twice the capacity of the existing replica vehicles. They allow for level boarding, which is one of the key benefits of introducing the modern vehicles. So there'll be high platforms, the vehicle doors will open, and you'll be able to step or roll across a very narrow threshold at a level with the vehicles. There's a series of different options that we'll start to explore, and 30% design to determine the best vehicle for Tampa. The way this would probably work is we'll piggyback on, work with other cities to piggyback on an order so we can get the best price. And then we have a lot of options when we select the vehicle about the internal configuration of the vehicle. So you can see this graphic at the bottom. I don't know if that red shows up very much. As these are fairly short trips, most of the trips will be standing trips. You'll get on, you'll go for a couple different stops and hop off. That allows for a lot of open floor space for wheelchairs, for mobility support devices, and for bicycles. And they can easily roll on and off the station, unlike the condition now where there's the ramp and the high block and a steel plate that deploys into the vehicle for ADA access. As I mentioned, the stops will be on the right-hand side of the vehicle. If you imagine looking north on Florida Avenue or south on Tampa Avenue, they would run on the left-hand, generally run on the left-hand curb line. The stops will be to the right of the vehicle in an island condition. It's quite a bit, if you think about Central Avenue BRT stops, the stops are very similar in their configuration in relationship to the vehicle. For the modernization improvements to introduce the modern streetcar vehicle, there's some modifications we need to make to the existing system. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed your...
Oh, just read another slide. That's it. Are these electrically powered?
Yes.
And the slide you just had up, it showed the...
Did it show the pantograph on the vehicle?
Is that like a solar panel that's there?
Oh, that's just shelter.
Shelter.
It could be a solar panel. It could operate some of the electronics at the stop, but right now that's like the one to the top right, the image, that's in Kansas City, that's just a shelter.
Maybe might be a good thing to throw in there to try to look at all these buildings you get going all the way around. If you could somehow harness all the solar energy you put on the roofs and all your shelters as well to help fund it.
One of the things that's exciting is that the really rapid change in the vehicle technology and the power systems. So we could theoretically run much of this extension off-wire with battery power, and then have charging at stops to charge the vehicle to continue on the route. So there's a lot of options we'll be looking at when we move forward.
From what I understand, a lot of millennials are really focused on the green energy type thing. So whatever you do incorporate the battery power or picking up on solar, it's probably a good image to send out across the nation.
Mr. Starkey?
I'm wondering if you could even have some kind of solar on the vehicle itself.
I don't think there's any systems now where the solar would generate enough power to power the vehicle purely, but I don't know if there could be charging technology. I'm not 100% sure about that. The modernization improvements, they include, we can run the new vehicles on the existing track and track that. There's little modification to the tracks except for a couple of corners that are a little tight that we need to smooth out because the vehicles can't turn as sharp as the replica vehicles. We have to do improvements to the existing stops. So as I mentioned, we'd be reconstructing those stops in the footprint of the stops to provide for the level boarding condition. And then we have to deal with the vehicle maintenance facility in Ybor City. We have to expand that to support the new vehicles. So they can fit on that site. We don't need to find a new property. We don't need to find a new building. We just need to extend it. The project this is these numbers, and we're going to keep the draft stamp on these for a period of time until we get through the first phases of 30% design and we have clearer numbers on some of the impacts. So these are still, we still see these as conservative numbers, and these are 2025 numbers. So these have been escalated to 2025 because they're year, the FTA has to report the dollars as year of expenditure dollars. So the costs are escalated to the year when that'll be spent, either on buying a vehicle or constructing a portion of the line, so it's staged down to 2025 for construction. There's about $100 million in modernization, 132 in the extension cost. That includes splitting proportional share of the new vehicles and the maintenance facility across the two sides of that divide. The operation and maintenance, this would be the annual dollar amount to support the service in 2025, 2026. We think that's probably also a fairly conservative number right now, but we'll be testing that further when we move into more detailed design. This is the full breakdown, so I'll just throw this up. You have this in your packet, so if you have questions about where any of these numbers come from, we can explain it to you, but these are organized by the FTA, SEC standard spreadsheet categories, and we have these broken down in great detail, so if there's any question about where any of these, what was used to build these numbers, we can provide that for you. We're looking at various funding and financing strategies for the project now. We're working with FTA, and we've received some positive feedback on this, but we're looking, initially, we understood that FTA would only support the extension as eligible for small starts funding under the Capital Improvement Grant Program. We've had discussions about the extent of costs and the change in the system for modernization, and they're considering including that and federalizing the full project, which makes us eligible for more federal money, which is a very positive thing for us, so that's underway. They've said yes. I don't think we've got a letter yet. We got an email. We have an email, we get a letter. When we get the letter, we'll collapse extension and modernization, we'll define it as a single project, and these numbers will change a bit, but that would put, on the bottom table, where the money's coming from, that would put that Capital Improvement Grant small starts funding up close to their maximum amount. So the small starts funding goes up to $100 million. We'd be pushing to the limit of that $100 million under the program. And then half of the rest of that money would be supported by FDOT New Starts program. The other half would be split between the city and Hart and other local partners. So that last quarter of the money that's locally funded, we'd be looking at offer transportation and other sources to support that. To get back to the question about the schedule, so this is the broad brush of the entire project schedule. We're in the spring 2020 period. We're wrapping up project development activities, including the NEPA 106 environmental impact analysis process. The design and engineering effort will begin with existing money from Hart and the city of Tampa. Next summer, we'll submit for the rating submittal. One of the things that we've been holding on is the ridership estimates. It's been a little frustrating for folks, but Hart is doing an onboard survey of the entire system. We have to use the information from that onboard origin destination survey to build our ridership estimates. So we're waiting for that to be complete, and then we'll publish our ridership numbers. But right now, given population employment along the existing line, there's about 20,000 people living within a half mile of the whole line, and there's about 70,000 jobs within a half mile of that full line, and significant existing transit service. So we'll use the population employment information plus the existing transit ridership information to build our ridership model, and we'll publish that information in the next couple months. That'll go into the rating submittal that we submit over the summer. 2022 is our target for completing design and engineering. That will be the time when we get the final commitment from FTA for the small starts funding. So if Sarah will talk about the timing broadly of how these related projects stack up. We'll be in construction and vehicle procurement 2023, 2024 with service late 2024, 2025. I think that's mine.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Just one. And to the question we were talking about earlier about the match, you know, when you look on slide 21, where he was showing, you know, the federal money, the FDOT money, and then the local match, you know, on average for the total project, it's about 36% is roughly what the local community for a small starts project, irrespective of the total cost, but small starts from our local budgets. So if we use that as sort of as a rule of thumb, I don't know if that's fair, but it seems to be working out that way. We know that we need to make sure that we have those kinds of things in place and laid out. Again, this is just the construction and the putting it into place.
This is
Not
capital cost
operations.
estimate, not the
Yeah.
operating. So we also have to show FDA that we've got long-term commitment to support operations of the system.
Exactly. And I'm looking forward to seeing this happen and talking about it for, it seems like 100 years. I think I went to your very first meeting, and yes, it's in the same room that you had the last time. But it really will create an enormous opportunity for economic development as well.
I should highlight quickly the regional story is an important story. Is that this streetcar will provide the connection to the regional rapid transit line, the connection across the core of downtown and to Ybor City that you would not otherwise have in place when that regional system is provided. So it would be a fragmented system that exists now to get folks around. This would allow for a transfer and a one-seat trip across the whole extent of downtown Tampa. All of those employment, it's the most intensive employment. It's not the largest employment center, but it's the most dense employment center in the region. It provides direct access through that. All of the cultural and entertainment destinations, significant residential density, and through to Ybor City, which is evolving as a more multifaceted mixed-use district now, which is kind of quiet, but it is an interesting transformation.
And to follow up on that, it's very close, within walking distance to the Cross Bay Ferry, which is just, the ridership there is off the chain right now. So, you know, if they build it, we will come, apparently.
Yeah, I think you said it. I think the connectivity piece is what starts to make sense to all of our residents. It's like, well, now I know what to do when I get there. It's like, you know, so that's a big piece of it. Not for today, but from an educational standpoint, just be curious about the $8 million operating number. I'm trying to think, you know, how that, what that's made up of. So again, not for today, but just for another time. Charles.
Yes. First, I just want to thank the Florida Department of Transportation and the City of Tampa for providing the funding to allow us to be free right now. That, I think it's a 3-year project, but more importantly is the hours of operation. Very important, having it run early in the morning and later on in the evening. It used to start at 11 o'clock, and maybe ran until about 6 or 7 or something like that. So my office is right next to the streetcar. I used to look out for years and see hardly anyone on the streetcar. Maybe the conductor or the driver. Maybe 2 drivers on there, and very seldom you see someone. No one from our building was riding it. Now people are riding it all the time. But part of it's free, but also it's the hours of operation. There are a lot of people living in the Channel District, living downtown, that can actually travel on it as a means of transportation. So we used to have a critic come to our court all the time, Marilyn Smith, and she would complain about the streetcar called a little toy. But now it's gone from a toy to a transportation mode, and I think this is really going to help make it a real transportation mode, maybe connected to some type of rapid transit system. I have a question about the vehicles themselves. Do you know where those vehicles may be manufactured, says the streetcars?
They're there's a Buy America requirement that goes with the federal money, so that those vehicles would need to be, there's a complicated calculation that I'm not fully familiar with about the amount of the vehicle content and the manufacturing of the vehicle that has to be done in the United States. But there's a very specific set of requirements. The 3 vehicles that I have listed in the image of the vehicle are all have been compliant with the FDA requirements.
Thanks.
Commissioner Marietta.
Thank you. How many cars are there, and how does it run the track itself? Is it like 1 car running, is it 3 cars running, and how do they cross each other?
There's right now on the existing line. It's primarily single track, and there's passive tracks. So there's places where that are staged along the line where the cars cross. They cross at some of the stops, but then there's passive tracks in other locations, like at Channelside and Admiral. There's dual tracks underneath Selman downtown next to Franklin. There's a passive track set, so that's how they maintain operations. And that the passive tracks Our passenger transit stations are positioned to allow for about maximum 10-minute headway service on the existing line. On the extension, we would be dividing it so it would be a northbound, southbound couplet. So it would act like two tracks side by side, they're just divided across the couple streets.
And I'm assuming that is that the operating numbers that you showed, is that also coming from the fund that you all are talking about?
It would be dependent on, yeah. Based on our current budget, yes, it would be absolutely dependent on it.
Yeah. And other than that, when you showed that, I was expecting to see that streetcar, the old-fashioned streetcar. So that looks considerably different. Looks really good, but it's just
We have some
quaint, charming, perhaps.
We're working on some illustrations now to show what the modern vehicle would look like in context in a few locations downtown.
So the other piece to that is actually having the fare box be simplified. So if we go to a place where we charge for it, if it connects into the regional project with the Flamingo Regional Fare Project, you know, you have less barriers to entry. You don't have to figure out how to do it. You know, if you have a fare, you can move across different methods of transit and allows for that to work very, very well. So I think that's another opportunity that's coming that we can include in when we get to a place where it's not free.
Yeah, we're looking at support for the operations. There's an existing Tampa Streetcar Service District which generates about $1 million a year. I think it will hit $1 million this year. We're looking at expanding that. So some of that operational costs are picked up by the property owners along the line that are paying that additional assessment each year. And it's a similar strategy as what's happening in Kansas City, where they made a policy decision that the service district and the money that was coming from that was sufficient enough to go for free fare service. So if you look at Kansas City as an example, it's a good model. It provides service to similar sorts of destinations as our system does, and it's been highly successful.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
I also wanted to point out highlight one last thing on the schedule and regarding the future extension studies. The city, in partnership with HART, intends to move forward with looking at the next phase of the streetcar, start the feasibility study process to look at whether we extend it further north, or we go towards the airport, the intermodal center, or whether we move back to Ybor. So that study's going to be, we're going to be doing the procurement for that sometime this year as well, depending on the decision on the circuit.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to talk about phasing of the regional project.
Good morning, Sarah McKinley, Hillsborough PO staff. My presentation's a little short, but I'm going to sort of highlight the 3 independent transit projects that we have going on in the region. But first I wanted to recap the Tri-County Vision Plan that was developed as part of the 2045 Long-Range Transportation Plan development. There was a tri-county level coordination that was done when we prepared both our population and employment forecasts. And you've seen this map before, but just sort of to recap what that looked like, we included looking at the reuse of the freight tracks. That was something that was very popular among the survey results, as well as including the streetcar extension. We have a robust bus rapid transit network, as well as express bus, and then also including managed lanes on some of the interstate facilities, and then tying also the water transit into those. So as you can see, we sort of have tied everything together with also our major population and employment centers for future expansion of our transit and highway networks as well. But today I'm going to highlight the 3 independent transit projects we do have going on. We just heard about the streetcar extension. We also have the Central Avenue BRT that is already gone through the federal process. So here we have, again, this is the streetcar extension up north to Palm that we just heard about. We also have the HART BRT arterial study. This is looking at connecting USF to downtown Tampa. And this sort of serves those key urban neighborhoods between the two. And then we also have the regional rapid transit project that is going on. There is some overlap between the BRT arterial study, but it's important to note with these projects that while there is a bit of overlap, again, the BRT arterial study is meant to serve those more urbanized, urban core neighborhoods, whereas the regional project will connect into it, but also serve as more regional trips as well. And then this is what all three of those projects look like. The reason it's important to talk about this right now and the phasing of these projects is, as you just heard with the streetcar extension, they're looking to move forward in the federal process sometime this summer, August of 2020. The BRT study that HART is doing is about a year behind. It's also tied in with some additional projects in that area, including the Heights Mobility Plan, which is looking at leveraging some roadway improvements, safety improvements, along with what comes out of that BRT study, as well as the intermodal center studies that are going on that are being coordinated, again, with the streetcar extension, with the BRT study, and with the regional rapid transit. So, like I said, the BRT study is about a year behind the streetcar study. So they're looking at possibly entering into federal requests for funding about the summer after in 2021, maybe the fall after. And then we have the regional rapid transit. That is a little bit larger scope of a study as well, and sort of a little bit behind that BRT study. So they'd be looking at any federal requests after the BRT study would move forward. So the reason it's important is, as we've already prioritized the Central Avenue BRT and the West Shore Interchange, we're able to get the funding for those, we prioritized it as a region. And so what we're hoping is that we can continue to understand the timing of each of these projects, that they will be phased, so that we're not going to the federal government asking for multiple projects at once. It looks like as a region we have planned this out, and that we know the timing for each of these. We are also asking that as we update the regional priorities, my understanding is that will be on the agenda for next month's meeting in June, that we include the streetcar extension as a regional priority. And then as we update the regional priorities in the future, we continue to prioritize both the BRT arterial study and then also the regional rapid transit study. So if you have any questions, I guess there's a short and sweet presentation, but it's more for discussion and dialogue as we move these projects forward into the regional priority process.
Thanks. Good presentation and summary. I just wanted to highlight that this will always be a little bit of a moving target on some things, and I propose that we have a continuing dialogue on this, and maybe it's a standing agenda item a couple of times a year. One of the things that we've been doing in Pinellas County is working very closely with FDOT on the 34th Street lane elimination project. That's been reviewed and vetted by the central office, or by the district office. It's now moving on to the central office for review. And we can implement that today without any additional operating dollars, because we have high-frequency bus service in the 34th Street South corridor. So that's not necessarily listed on an app, but in order to do a bus rapid transit project, we would have to have a business access and transit lane designated in that corridor. And we have a resurfacing coming up in about another year, but we won't be able to incorporate the capital project into that resurfacing project because it's a substantial investment of creating a red lane marking. So we would probably have to go forward with a very small starts kind of project application for that. So I just wanted to put that on the radar screen. It's it would be great if we could match up all the resurfacing projects, but that would likely be a standalone resurfacing for the 34th Street. And so for that reason, we may be as early as 2021 or 2022 looking at a potential small starts application for that. So I just think we keep it on the list and have that conversation as well.
Yeah, just a real quick question. I mean, based on what we've just heard as far as the staging, because I think to your concern is how do we make sure we don't bump into each other along the way as far as timing is concerned? When we are reviewing our priority list, and should we put it in the order of, for example, in these three projects, if they're on our priority list, should they be listed in that order so that we don't bump into each other in the future? I mean, I don't know that it is now. That's why I'm asking, because We do have some other priorities that we've added to the list that is much longer in nature and will take much more time to develop. But these three really are in the queue, as you know, because as we just heard with the streetcar, they're right there. And I know I happen to live in the Heights, so I'm very familiar with the arterial BRT, and how critical that is to several urban initiatives. So there's some angst on getting that moving as well. Art's very much in part of making that happen and how it's working within the community and our TOD plan. And obviously the regional rapid transit's been on the queue for a while. But I was just curious, does our priority list that we decide to embrace reflect that kind of not bumping into each other along the way? I was looking through our notes trying to find it, but I didn't see it.
Historically, our priority list hasn't been numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for instance. But I think for this discussion and for the phasing, it is important that we have a shared understanding of what the sequencing of these projects will be, because we don't really step on each other's toes. So I think what I'd like to do at the staff level, working with FDOT and our transit providers, is just making sure from a readiness standpoint and a timing of design plans and funding commitments and things like that, what's ready to go at what time. And then we can, that's why I suggested maybe we bring this back later in the year and have it as a standing item perhaps twice a year, because things change. And maybe this could be revisited even in November, for instance, our final meeting of the year. Let's just confirm. So we do it at the beginning of the year and then maybe at the end of the year, just a thought. And then incorporate that into our adoption every year.
Because as Mr. Gwynn indicated, us all speaking with a common voice makes a big, big difference. And having that, working with FDOT, having the staging, we all know where we are, and we all, if we agree that this is our plan, we're not bumping into different buckets of FTA money. The small tar starts would be quite a bit different than, say, the CSX. That would not be a small starts. That would be a whatever you call that, a big starts. So I just wanted to kind of bring that back to the table in terms of our agenda. If we're reiterating, to your point, every twice a year, our priority list and communicating that to our legislators, then they can help us help our legislature know that we're all speaking in a way that we need to, obtain the dollars for our investment in our community.
Yeah, just to build on that a little bit, I definitely agree with Whit that we need to come back to this on a regular basis because there are so many moving pieces, not the least of which is the funding, is the local match. So for example, as we've been talking at the staff level and coordinating about what the next steps are, and you heard Steve Shucraft talk about some of that coordination that's happening at the staff level. So as we've talked with the HART staff about the Florida Avenue BRT project, and there's a couple of different paths that could take. If we have sales tax funding, then it could be a more capital intensive project. If we don't have the sales tax funding, then maybe there are some ways to do a better service out there than what we've got out there, but maybe not go after a federal, CIG type grant, which means that we wouldn't then have to put it on the regional priority list necessarily. So there's a lot of unknowns for us right now, and so I think it makes good sense to come back and keep talking about this. We wanted to bring the streetcar project forward today, in part because of the discussion that we had in November about less familiarity in the region about what are the transit projects that are coming out of Hillsborough, and the streetcar project seems to be the one that is most ready to go, assuming that we have local funding. We are definitely thinking about it as part of the regional system, as you've heard. So there was one other thing I wanted to throw in there. Oh yeah, and it was the coordination with the T-BARTA staff about the timing of the regional rapid transit project. So let's say ideally for most efficiency, that the transit improvements in the I-275 right-of-way would be constructed in coordination with the rest of the construction that's going on I-275. So we were just talking about the timing of that, of the West Shore interchange that would bring those express lanes through the West Shore area and have the tie-in all the way to downtown Tampa. And so if we're talking about, maybe 2028, that's under construction, or maybe it's open to traffic in 2028 or 2029, maybe was what I had heard earlier. And I know that's kind of a moving target too. But that gives us a few more years to figure out how to line up construction funding for the transit component of that. And so that's kind of the conversation that we've been having about, how do we stage our requests for federal grants?
Thank you. Cassandra?
I think this is a critical conversation when we're talking about multiple agencies doing multiple projects and us all going up to Washington and asking for the same. It takes years to get our delegations to understand the projects that we're pushing, and so we do need to talk about our top priorities as a group, but understand that there may be one project that is the most ready to move forward. And it's not necessarily when you enter the small starts process that is important. It is when your project is ready for that grant agreement. And so I really appreciate the idea of bringing this back and consistently looking at what are our top priorities as a group, but also how ready are these projects to be. You're going to go talk to your legislative delegation about 3 projects and say, but this one is the most ready, and that is the one that is the most important to the region because it is ready. It's ready.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz?
I know some of us sit on T-BARTA and some of us don't. And we have been having the discussion at T-BARTA about our dedicated funding as well. So I think there are multiple transit funding questions out there, and it seems to me that somehow they need to be coordinated because it would be disjointed to have different groups asking for transit funding to the public at the same time. So I think there needs to be a conversation with T-BARTA and TMA about a joint solution to the funding question, because it wouldn't be good to have both organizations out there at the same time.
That seems to be the message that we're all talking the same thing, and that is that there may be an ideal list that we all agree this is the first, second, third, fourth, if we got to that point. But there's going to be kind of things that split projects up and down depending on readiness, funding, all of that. So, we want to make sure it's kind of like, I'm not a surfer, but kind of like catching the wave at the right time. So it'd be great to stick to our number 1, 2, 3, but if they're not ready, we're going to miss opportunities. So I think that's something that if we continue to have that conversation, then hopefully we can be ready to jump on opportunities that come along. But certainly our partners from FDOT can be right there in T-BARTA as well. Yes. And
I know at T-BARTA we're talking about the same projects that we're talking about here, but I'm also talking about funding source for T-BARTA for self-funding to keep its organization viable, because right now we're going to the legislature every year and we know that we can't continue to do that. So there's that funding discussion as well.
Commissioner Mariano?
It's definitely going to come down to the numbers. Then you take a look at the funding. I think it's going to be important to work with FDOT, and I think taking that trip to DC is going to be probably done over probably 2-3 years' time. And if we have 3 counties going up there and doing it at the same time, whether we can coordinate with NACO or not, those trips will may go up anyway. I think it's critical we actually spend that extra time, and kind of build that over the years, because it will take a little time.
Yes, Commissioner Ward.
I couldn't agree with both Commissioner Mariano and Commissioner Starkey more, because I think it's really important that the reason we have T-BARTA is to address those projects that are moving across county lines. the key word in Tampa Bay Regional Transit Authority is the word regional. And I know a couple years ago when we first started moving through the federal pipeline for dollars for our BRT Central Avenue line, when we went to Washington DC, we had people from the region that were representing the region that went with us so that we could send a very strong message that we are talking with one loud, strong voice about the region. And to that point, I really hope you're not losing sight of the fact that our BRT Central Avenue line, which is the beginning of the spine for the 41-mile feasibility plan that we're all working towards, we are under construction. We got our letter of intent that allows us to start construction, and we have. So right at the end of December, just before the holiday break, I had a delightful conversation with Jane Williams, the acting FTA administrator, who was incredible. We had dotted every I and crossed every T on her big Excel chart about anything outstanding. We had completed everything, and she was looking at shortly after the first of the year for us to get to the next point where we know we're actually going to get our hands on the money. And we have a scheduled trip to DC at the end of this month to go and talk with her about it again.
That's great.
So we're really, really excited.
Commissioner Starkey.
I'm chair of the federal committee at FAC, and we have our FAC fly-in coming up at the end of September. And I think we can all take a lesson from Commissioner Long that it's really good to relationship build, and I would like to suggest that we take that opportunity when hopefully everyone's up there in September, that we go let them know we're coming and just start doing that relationship building. So throwing that out there for the end of September.
Send us the dates.
Commissioner Rio.
And I think it's a brilliant idea. I think if we, the day before, the day after, we make that, so we're not tied into the FAC flying, we can do it before or after. And, you know, I don't think anybody watched Commissioner Starkey's Facebook page, but at NACO, this past thing. So if you didn't see it or not, Commissioner Starkey got pulled from the audience at the general meeting by President Trump and got to introduce him and talk about some things that are going on in the county. So congratulations to them. So we got to take advantage of her celebrity status.
So we got to grab it.
Grab it all we can, right?
Yeah, that was an honor. So
Anything else that we need to touch on? Are you good?
Yeah, it's just for your discussion, Seth.
Good discussion. Yeah, great discussion. I think obviously, you know, your idea was well received, so we're doing it every week. Almost. Well, two times a year. All right, so we're going to, any other updates? I guess there's other updates here. Anything else that we need to,
Yes. I just want to mention Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council is hosting its Chicolo Region Award Ceremony April 24th. And if you have a project that is complete or near complete, perhaps before 2028, please go ahead and submit that project for consideration, and that will be due March 20th.
Thank you.
And I wanted to correct the agenda packet, which states that our next meeting, well, it's got it on two different dates. The actual date for our next meeting is July the 10th. That is coordinated with the meeting of the MPO chairs with the Central Florida MPO Alliance. So we'll be having a brief meeting of the TMA. We'll probably focus on our TMA priorities update. Then convene with the three chairs of the other MPOs of West Central Florida and talk about the larger regional priorities. And then we'll get together and talk about super regional, mega regional issues with our partners from the Orlando area. And all that's going to take place at the Hillsborough Community College Plant City campus at the Training Center.
Thank you.
I would like to have a little announcement about Starkey Gap.
Tina Russo, new active transportation planner for Pasco County NPO. On April 15th, 1:30, we will be having a ribbon cutting for the Starkey Gap Now Starkey Trail. 2.4 miles that connects 80 miles of trail, and no telling how much in the near future. So we'll be sending that out. We're making several event plans for that, but 1:30, April 15th, that Wednesday afternoon. Most likely at the Trinity area, but we can send out the press release, hopefully in the very near future, about all the events around that.
If I could add on that, so this is the completion of the Pinellas, I went to your Pinellas Trail celebration 2 years ago, was it? 3 years ago? It took a long time for us to get our little piece in, but we have built Duke an amazing road, or DOT has built Duke an amazing trail going through their power corridor. This function will be in conjunction with the Greenways and Trails Council. They'll be coming in, they come in on
the 14th.
The 14th, and so that night, and we'll get an invite out to you, but the night of the 14th, there is a reception at the barn at Starkey Market, and that the public is welcome to. And just so you know, the Greenways and Trails Council meetings are open to the public. I used to serve on that, so those are always interesting meetings to attend. They move around the state, and that is going to be at Starkey Environmental Education Center. But look for an invitation. I hope you all will come. And there's a ride after the ceremony, so bring your bike if you'd like, and we're going to do a little ride. So we're expecting people from all over the state to come. This really makes I don't know how much will be completed now when we finish this gap.
80 miles currently.
Of the coast to coast?
That's awesome.
No, the coast to coast.
The coast to coast will add over 100 miles. once
Yeah.
it's completed.
So it's a big missing kink in that coast to coast trail.
Well, that's great. Congratulations on that. Looking
Finally.
forward to that. Anything else before we move on to our roundtable discussion? Okay. So who's going to head?
So at this point, we'd like to invite members of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committees from the 3 MPOs to come join us at the table for a conversation. And I don't know if the transit agency representatives are welcome to stay, but don't have to if you don't care to.